I don't think it's crazy to say that from 2020 to 2021 was the best time to be in the virtual reality industry. The medium, as both a trend and an emerging technology, had reached its peak in both investing and cultural significance. And as far as we knew, VR had only one way to go, and that was up. Obviously, with everyone being stuck inside, virtual reality provided an escape from people who were feeling a lot of anxiety about what was going on in the real world. There was no bubbles, no layoffs, no trying to convince yourself that VR was going to come back next year. Instead, there was a gold mine of games and experiences to choose from, ranging from indie developers to AAA developers pouring their hearts and souls into the projects they create. And so today I wanted to take a look at what was considered to be the prime of virtual reality. Not only to reminisce, but to see if there are any lessons that we can take into the current industry, and maybe potentially find that spark that we lost so long ago. But to do that, I'm gonna have to boot up my Oculus Quest 1.
I am excited to announce Oculus Quest. It is shipping in the spring, and it is going to cost $399. This is it. This is the all-in-one VR experience that we have been waiting for. It's wireless, it's got hand presence, 6 degrees of freedom, and it runs Rift-quality experiences.
I think we underestimate the impact of the Oculus Quest 1 in bringing VR to where it was today. And I'm sure you're probably wondering why we're even talking about it when we're supposed to be talking about the prime of virtual reality. But this headset truly is the one that started it all. Without it, there would be no meta, no games, no Gorilla Tag, no really anything. VR would remain a hobby, tethered to a computer, not even remotely reaching the audience that it did. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is really up for debate, but two things are certain. Despite still not knowing how many Quest 1 headsets sold, those who did purchase a Quest 1 in mid to late 2019 ended up being early contributors to what would become the modern day VR industry. Because through learning from their mistakes, the world, freshly thrown into lockdown, would bear witness to the greatest VR headset to ever be created. On October 13th, 2020, Oculus released what would be now known as the Meta Quest 2. And thanks to its $300 price tag, it would go on for the next couple of years to sell over 20 million units. Some of the most popular titles that shipped with this was Gorilla Tag, Echo VR, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, Population 1, and Beat Saber. All of which were in the absolute prime of their titles, reaching the most players that they'd ever see, and by proxy, the VR industry. So what is it that specifically made the games of this time so popular compared to today, where we're basically grasping for straws? I think if I had to answer, it would most likely have to do with the diversity of the age demographics. If you wanted to play a story-driven, hardcore, gritty game, you could do that. If you wanted to play a competitive FPS esport, you could do that. If you simply just wanted to wind down after a long day and play some poker, you could do that. And that's not to say you can't do that in 2026. The only problem is you're still playing the same games from back then. The modern day VR industry, at least in its successful titles, could basically be all tied back to the lemming open sourcing Gorilla Tag's movement. Because of this, indie developers now hold the same weight of risk management as executives at AAA companies. The way it goes is that you remix what already works in order to mitigate your risk and make as much profits as possible. What I was trying to show in part 2 is that the prime VR industry wasn't just a bunch of Gorilla Tag clones. There was a huge variety of different genres of games, most of which now are basically completely outdated and left to rot, meaning that there's a huge gap in the market for a lot of modern day titles to take those reins. And I think one thing that developers forget is that most big game studios didn't start out by making live service. Instead, what they would do is release games that were a lot simpler and less demanding in nature, which would allow them to test new ideas and theories without having to make a huge financial risk doing so. Then, once they've gained enough experience and carved out a name for themselves in whatever niche they chose, that's when they would do a huge financial risk live service title that could potentially make them hundreds of millions of dollars. And for those of you who say it's basically pointless to do that, considering the audience for the games that appeal more towards kids is just so vast, this audience is not going to stay kids forever. Eventually, they'll grow up, and they're going to want something that's a little bit more than just Gorilla Tag movement and Unity graphics. And if you're able to provide that, there's practically no other option, so they would have to flock to you specifically. Plus, if the title is impactful enough, it could potentially get some former VR users to come back into the industry, thus increasing the users and keeping it alive. I think with the slow decline of the VR bubble, there's no reason why we should be expecting new headsets to be the thing that replaces the already dwindling audience. So finding the things that work, the gaps in the market that no other developer has touched in a hot minute, is going to be what sets you up for success. And because all this content is quote unquote new to this audience, they're going to be much more receptive to it on a content creation standpoint, therefore triggering the feedback loop that eventually creates viral VR games. And if this video ends up pushing you to do that, join my Discord server and let me know, because despite it being dead, I still check it every single day. But other than that, that's all from me.